Welcome to From Betrayal to Breakthrough. I'm Dr. Debbie Silver, and today's guest is Dr. Elizabeth Cohen. Dr. Cohen is a clinical psychologist. She's the CEO and founder of the online divorce course and membership Afterglow, the light at the other side of divorce. Dr. Cohen's online course teaches women how to heal, grow, and thrive after divorce, no matter how difficult the process has been. She's been featured on the Tamron Hall Show, The Wall Street Journal, NBC News, Women's Health, HuffPost, Thrive Global, Daily Beast, and Good Housekeeping. Dr. Cohen is a weekly contributor to Psychology Today with her divorce course column. Dr. Cohen hosts the Divorce Doctor podcast, where she interviews people about their divorce experiences. Dr. Cohen is the author of Light at the Other Side of Divorce, Discovering the New You, which debuted at #1 in popular psychology on Amazon. If you're divorced, getting divorced, or considering divorce, you're going to love this episode. I'm talking with the divorce doctor, Dr. Elizabeth Cohen, who will be talking about her journey to healing, divorce recovery, and so much more. Let's get right to it. Here's Dr. Elizabeth. Okay, everybody, we have Dr. Elizabeth Cohen with us today, and you know, this is From Betrayal to Breakthrough, and very often when we're betrayed by a partner, it can lead to divorce. So I have brought on the most amazing expert to share with us how to thrive, not just survive post-divorce. So welcome, Dr. Elizabeth.
Thank you so much for having me. I'm excited to be here.
We're so glad to have you. So to get to, be this specialist in helping people get through a divorce, is there a story?
Yeah, there's a story. So, I have over 15 years of private practice experience of working with people as a clinical psychologist. So I bring to that my professional expertise. And then I, 10 years ago, was separated when I kicked my ex-husband out and had a 6-month-old and a 2-year-old, and have moved through that pain deeply, heroically, and now have a beautiful relationship of 8 years, and am really, the kids and me and my relationships are thriving.
That's so great. And we'll get to everything you're doing now, but bring us back to that time, because it is so typical that we go through something so challenging and it uproots everything, and it affects us physically, mentally, and emotionally. So what were some of the symptoms you had, and what were you feeling? What were you experiencing? And give us sort of the roadmap of how you moved towards your, from one step to the next, what you did.
For sure. So I think what I was really suffering from was thinking I knew everything about everything and I was perfect. Mm-hmm. I married somebody who struggled with the disease of alcoholism, and that allowed me to constantly feel better than another person. So I didn't realize in my marriage that I was not giving him the dignity to be his own person. And I was constantly able to see how I thought I was better. And because of the disease of alcoholism, his behavior got so unacceptable that I kicked him out. But that could be the story, right? I could stop here and tell you that's the story, but that's bullshit. Can I curse on this? Yeah.
You just did. It's okay.
Yeah. Okay. That's bullshit. Like, that's part of the story, but I was part of the story. So I had a moment when I was in the playground with my kids' friends, and they were asking me about my ex, and I was telling some dramatic story, and I literally left there, and I was in Central Park, and there was two paths. And I thought, I could take one of these two paths. I can spend the rest of my life telling this story about him, and they were very dramatic and very exciting and very, colorful, or I could figure out, how the hell did I end up here, and how do I make sure I don't come here again? So that was the path I decided to take. And that I took literally one step forward, 2 steps back. And I looked that first night, I Googled divorce recovery. And back then I couldn't find anything. Mm-hmm. And I thought, okay, I didn't realize, I thought, okay, I must not be able to recover. Like, if there's nothing out there, then there must be I'm not going to recover. And I thought, I'm devastated. And so I just turned into the tools that I knew. There were 2 tools I knew. One was cognitive behavioral therapy, which I'd been doing for years. And the other was that a friend said to me, I know there are other people who marry to alcoholics. I know there's a group, why don't you try that? Those are the only 2 tools I had. Yeah. Went on their hands and knees, a mess, crying. And then, one day at a time, 1 foot forward, 2 steps back, perfectly imperfectly, things started to shift a little, in that I started looking at it about me and not about him.
And I want to stop you there, because right when you said there are two, you saw two paths in front of you. You could have taken either one. Now it is so, and I see this all the time, because when it comes to betrayal, it is so easy. We have a very powerful story. This person that we trusted and depended on and counted on betrayed us, and we have our story. And at the end of the day, we have our story, and that's it. Then there's the opportunity where we say, okay, we have our story, but I can have a much better story and so much more if I take that other path. So, you said it real casually, like, so I saw the two paths and I just took this one. But I want to know, what was it, or was there this defining moment? What was going through you where you said, I see this path, I know I can take this, but I'm choosing to do this other one?
I think what happened was, in that playground, when I told those stories, people were emotional. They were crying. I got all the empathy, that I thought I wanted.
Mm.
But Deb, I left there and I felt like shit. I thought, wait a minute. I'm the person in the story. I'm not telling some novel or some movie. This is my life. I don't want this to be my life. So it was actually saying it and noticing how I felt when I was telling my story.
So important. And I hope everybody listening, everybody watching, you really embrace that, because it's so true. We have our story. And I think, and I know I hear it all the time, these well-rehearsed stories where I know that person must have said that story 1,000 times. And when you check in with how you feel as you're saying it, that's small that's benefiting somehow from it, where you get to be right, you get someone to blame, you get a target for your anger, all of those benefits that we look at. But when we let it go for a much more powerful story, check in how you feel then. It's not that the road is easier in front of you, but it just feels a lot better. So you noticed how
Totally.
Yeah.
And I also noticed, Deb, what I just realized? I hadn't thought of this before, but when you were talking, just to get super deep here, like, the people's reactions, that's what I want. I wanted unconditional empathy and love. I had wanted that from my partner. And it's because I never got it from my parents. I mean, I'm a shrink. I'm going to say it. Here we go. Right. Like so that's what I wanted. And you know what? It's so fleeting. And I see this in clients. I don't know if you see this, Deb, especially when they talk about infidelity or betrayal. They tell me the betrayal story, and then they say, they wait for the pause, and then they say, and it was with my best friend, and they look at me to see my shock and to see my reaction. And it's like, it gives me so much empathy. I say to them, what do you want right now? What do you need right now? Yeah. What do you need? I needed empathy. I didn't realize that, but but it's going to the wrong place.
Right. Exactly. And we eventually come around to realize that when we give that to ourselves, that's when we take off with our healing. Right. Okay. So cognitive behavioral therapy and support. And I'll just emphasize here, the right support, because the wrong type of support does way more harm than good. So here you were, you had that support, and so you needed, you said you needed that empathy, that love, you were looking for that empathy and that love. When did you start to were you feeling it from the group? Were you feeling it from the therapy? Like what happened?
Yeah. So a couple things happened. Definitely when it comes to empathy, I felt it from the group. I went to Al-Anon, and there is a line in the introduction that says, even if you can't see it, we love you in a way that we will always love you. They literally just say that on the first day. Like, you're just loved. Boom, done. And so that was huge, that people were supportive and cared, even not knowing me, warts and all. So that was hugely important. The other thing that happened in those rooms was that I started to be able to see that men, because in my particular situation of being heterosexual, can be vulnerable. I didn't know that. I had a father who has an addiction. I didn't know that that was possible. So I started seeing that, unconditional love can also come from men, and so can humility. So I really started seeing examples, and I recommend this to my clients, and I recommend this to your listeners. Find examples of what you think doesn't exist. I promise you there are books of people. I promise you there are people out there. I also, though, got clear one day about how much anger I had. I walked by a kickboxing studio, and I said, kickboxing classes. And I called my partner at the time, my boyfriend, now he's my husband. And I said, I just packed this kickboxing class. Do you think I need to? And he, like, before I could say it, he's like, yes. I was like, oh, you think I'm angry? Me? I'm so sweet. And he said, you've got. And so I just went right into processing, as I call it in my book, righteous anger. I started identifying. So that was another piece, the identifying the anger.
And that's so important because here's the thing. It's not like we're not justified. We are. We have every right to be angry, right?
Totally.
We're duped. We were lied to. We were betrayed. We were, our expectations were blown up, whatever it was. And so, but here's the thing, yes, you can have that anger. You can be right, and that's really it. So the kickboxing, I love that
Yeah.
because it really depends on, I really feel like there's the right movement for the certain mood, right?
Well, and here's the thing. So the fight, when we're going through a trauma, and I think being betrayed and going through divorce is a trauma, we have a physiological reaction of fight, flight, or freeze. Those are biologically appropriate, as you know, and probably share with your audience. And so I needed to move through the fight response, because as humans, it gets stuck in our body if we don't really process it. So I needed to release the righteous anger in an appropriate way. Now I listen to Rage Against the Machine and dance in my apartment when I need to release my rage. I always know I need to release the fight, flight, or freeze energy. That's a huge part of what I had to go through.
And this is so beautiful that you're talking about it, because I always say, and this, the issues are in the tissues. And it's when we release them, that's when we start to heal. And if we only go for, let's say, the cognitive piece,
Yep.
right? Well, it's stuck in the body. What about that? We need to just heal fully. And in order to heal fully, it's physically, mentally, emotionally, psychologically, spiritually, all of it. Beautiful.
Mm-hmm.
So here you were now, you got him out of the house. You were taking on, the therapy and the support, and you found, the kickboxing, getting rid of all that anger. How did you start feeling when, just even right with using those tools?
How did I start feeling my feelings?
No, how were you, was your body
How did I start feeling?
Yeah.
Yeah. So that's such a good question. I mean, I think what I noticed first was I was less irritable. I think all of it was coming out sideways. So I was less annoyed with my children, with people on the subway, with, just irritability. I just was less irritable. I started believing in a future again. I stopped thinking that today was like the last day of my life, basically. And I did have suicidal thoughts. I remember thinking, what is the point? Like, and that thinking shifted. I felt the littlest bit of hope.
Yeah. Yeah. And that's it's such a shift, because, it's that negative spiral that we start to go on. And then, it's like we have to stop that spiral. And now here you're taking that spiral in the other direction, and it's moving up, and you're feeling better. And then because you're feeling better, your outlook is different. You're different, with your kids, that sort of thing. So what did it lead to?
Well, I learned a really great strategy then, actually, that I have in my book, where I actually, even though I couldn't imagine in that moment life so differently, I had the two kids, I was bogged down with them. Did an imagery of my ideal future self. I imagined if I had healed, who I would be.
Mm-hmm.
And I really connected to her. I didn't know if she would ever come, but I started to feel connected to her. Every morning I'd wake up and say yes to her. I don't even know what she was saying, but just accepting her. And then things started to happen where I think I started saying yes to more things. Mm-hmm. So I started engaging in my life in a different way. I started saying okay to things that would have scared me. Mm-hmm. I was open to talking about things that in the past I wouldn't have talked about. I was less afraid. I talk a lot also in that I'm a therapist. I like to look, like I said, like I had it all together, but I was really in pain and I didn't want to share any of that. Mm-hmm. So because I started seeing men be vulnerable and that I could share something and they would hear it through the support group, I found myself being attracted to people who I could start seeing when they weren't listening to me or weren't being humble. I tell this story about how I went on a date with someone who was really fun, and then we're like finishing up and he said, "You're a psychiatrist, right?" Meanwhile, I'm a psychologist. And he says, "You can get me some Xanax and Ativan, right?" And I thought, here I am again. And I thought, not going to shame him, not going to shame me, compassionately see what's going on. And that led me to choosing to focus on me and not focus on finding another person. And as often happens, I had a party. I said, "I'm so glad there's no one I'm interested in." My husband walked in. No, my now husband walked in, and I could just feel energetically that he was a good, kind person because I had been around enough of those people.
Yeah. And I say this all the time. It's
Yeah,
when you do the work to heal, you can't help but resonate at a very different level. And then that level shows up. You're different and you just won't attract who you would have attracted as that old
exactly.
version of you. That healing
Exactly.
brings about a very different type of energy. And you know, what's interesting too, you talk about that highest self or that version of you
Yes,
that you would meet with. And we teach this in the Institute where it really is, it sounds like what you were doing was you were shortening the space from the
yes.
version that you were currently and her, and
Yeah,
just shortening that timeline and that space until you just became. So the way you were acting, the way you were moving, things you were doing was more representative of what she would do, which is who we all
exactly.
are if we just tap in and get ourselves out of the way. It sounds like that's what you're doing.
Exactly. Exactly. And I just want to say, just because I met someone amazing didn't mean I didn't have to keep working. I remember walking up to a conversation where I wanted to tell him we were going to be exclusive. And I said my mantra over and over, I'm a winner in every way, every day. I was terrified to tell him. I was, even though it's an ongoing process. And then I stepped into that vulnerability. And I would say that's the piece, like just being willing. I wasn't before able to step into any vulnerability.
Mhm.
But the healing allowed me to feel safe, loved enough so that I could step into vulnerability. And to me, there's nothing more intimate than two people being vulnerable together.
Oh, I love that. And it's so true. And people do look at it as weakness. I think it is the ultimate strength.
Yes. I think it's like there's nothing sexier than like sharing your heart and letting another person witness that. Like that is true intimacy to me.
Yeah, beautiful. So talk to us about divorce now, because there
Yeah.
are so many people who they're headed for a divorce, they're in the middle of a divorce, they're coming out of a divorce, they've been divorced, and they are bitter. They just are,
Yeah.
right? And it's just they get it, they have every right to be. I get it. But this is something you see all the time. So
Yes.
help us with that person who's really struggling.
So, we all have met people, right? Who you meet at a party and they've been divorced for 20 years, but they tell you about their betrayal story as if it happened yesterday, right? And there's a Buddhist saying that it's like getting angry at someone and throwing hot coals at them. You're the only one who gets burned. Like the thing is, my loves, like you deserve a better life. That story is not your whole story. Even if it is the worst of the stories, you have so many other stories within you. And there's a thing I always think about is like, God, let these people live in my mind rent free. They're not thinking about you. They're not telling the story. They have a totally different story. What is happening to you? And just know the story, self-talk is self-hypnosis. We just talked about how I basically hypnotized myself to believe I was someone else. You
Mhm.
you will hypnotize yourself to feel like you're worthless, you're unlovable, every time you tell your betrayal story, you're being betrayed over again. You're just betraying yourself.
That's it. I love that. Self-talk is self-hypnosis. We're so conditioned to speaking to ourselves a certain way and blaming ourselves or whatever it is that we're doing, and we forget that we have everything available that helped us create the negative to create the positive and create a different kind of talk. And that's, and I remember someone saying to me, it's like, I'm divorced, I'm divorced, I'm divorced. At what point are you single?
Yes. Because there's this pressure to be in a partnership that you're only accepted and a person if you're in a partnership. And the truth is that's not true. You're a person, a whole person yourself. And so if we stop defining ourselves by our relationship status, we could start really focusing on us. And you know what? I tell my clients, date someone who's divorced. You know why? They've done the hard work of hopefully of looking at themselves if they're ready to move on. Like check into how they manage the divorce. Like divorce is a transition. We go through, life is full of transitions. And so the question is, how do you manage this transition?
Hmm. Beautiful. And I know sometimes there's the friend issue. The friends go with one partner or the other. Can you speak to that?
Yeah. I mean, I think that you're bringing up the fact that there's grief and loss in divorce. And I think that I always suggest that people allow the flow to happen, to not resist. If you have a friendship where you can say, hey, is it hard for you to be friends with both of us? Because I'd really like to still spend time with you. Great. Be curious, be open, treat the person with the dignity that they deserve. But if they're talking smack about you, let them go. Like, I just think that that's the least of you need to focus on you. And a lot of people get really focused on the other people, but you also need to allow yourself to have the grief. When you have a divorce, you're letting go of a life that you thought you were going to have, even if you don't want it anymore.
Mm-hmm. Right. It's definitely a letting go for sure. And I think that's really an important point that you made. If those friends, let's say, are going with the other, the other partner, maybe you've outgrown that group, and you've just outgrown them. And that whole transit, when you're undergoing this transformation, you're changing, you're growing. And part of that often means outgrowing what used to make sense doesn't make sense anymore. What used to work doesn't work anymore. And friendships may not work anymore. So if we look at it that way, it seems like it doesn't hurt as much.
Such a good point. And my favorite phrase about friendships is that people come into our life for a season, a reason, or a lifetime.
Mm-hmm.
We have this pressure that we're supposed to stay close to everyone. If you're evolving, relationships evolve, which is why divorce shouldn't be a stigma. Because if you're evolving, hopefully your partner evolves with you. But if they don't, it's okay to release it. Similarly with friends.
Yeah. So let's talk about now post-divorce and like starting over and that whole thing.
Yeah. I think one of the things I like to say about dating is if you go out with somebody and you feel like, God, this person's so familiar. I feel like we've known each other our whole lives. You have. It's someone in your family. It's someone you've dated before. Like, be really conscious of what you're feeling, like we talked about earlier when you tell the story, when you're with this other person. This is your life. I have a chapter called Living Life by Design, Not by Default. Like, what do you want? What are the things you want? I knew for me that when I started over, I wanted a partner who was humble. That was the thing. That was so important to me. But that was mine. What's yours? Really think about, write down the things that are important. Is it that the person's in therapy? Is it that the person can be vulnerable, as we talked about earlier? Really think about doing this next phase intentionally rather than just like some sort of like do-over.
Right. I love that. Being intentional and deliberate about it instead of just winging it, right? I mean, think about it. If you go on a vacation, because I travel all the time, you think about what you're packing, right? Why are we not thinking about, something so much more important about like who we want to spend our time with?
Yeah. And I'm wondering if your clients in particular, if you've been betrayed, you also have to acknowledge that trauma and you have to listen for when that trauma piece comes up. If you're sitting across from someone and they mention something and you think, oh, this person might cheat or whatever, just notice what comes up and do a little intervention where you say, that was then, this is now. Look around the room and say, it is 2021. I see someone preparing steak. I see a person wearing a blue shirt. Ground in the now.
Yeah.
What happened, but please ground in the now so that you know this person across from you. We don't know yet who they are. We don't know, but don't put the shit from the past onto this person.
So, right. We don't want to relive the past, but we also want to do the work that's necessary before you even start to date in the first place.
Oh, yeah.
I think that's really important too. So I can't believe how the time has just flown by. What do you want to make sure everyone knows as we wrap up?
I just want anyone to know if you've been through a betrayal and you're here with Deb or you're going through a divorce, you are a superhero. You are already doing work that most people in this world do not want to do. Looking at your pain and trying to move through it. That is miraculous, brave, and admirable. So I just want to say hats off to all of you.
I love that you said that because it is so true. I see so many people numbing, avoiding, distracting, anything to avoid facing and feeling these very painful emotions. So the ones who do, they're ready for something big. They're ready to heal. They're ready for transformation. So I couldn't agree with you more. So Dr. Elizabeth, where do we go to learn more about you and the great work you do?
DrElizabethCohen.com is my website, Dr. Elizabeth Cohen. And on Instagram, I'm the Divorce Doctor.
Okay, that's so great. I want to thank you so much because I know there are so many people, in the various stages of divorce or even considering divorce, and it's all good. And there are tools and resources and the best version of you on the other side. So thank you so much for your insight and your wisdom.
Thank you for having me.
I love how Elizabeth saw the two paths and chose the path to recovery. It's always our choice which path we take. When she did, she realized she was on a search for empathy and love, which eventually was exactly what she found. Stay in touch with Elizabeth by going to drelizabethcohen.com, and we'll have all of her information in the show notes at thepbtinstitute.com/podcast. Here's my biggest takeaway. Self-talk is self-hypnosis. Be careful about what you say and think because your mind will believe whatever you say. So why not program yourself with powerful and positive thoughts and beliefs? One way is by imagining your future self. Have a conversation with him or her. Act, think, react, behave. Do everything like that version of yourself would do until you become your best self. It's deliberate, intentional, and it works. You know what else works? The PBT Institute, where we have everything you'd ever need to become your physical, mental, emotional best. Community, support, certified coaches and practitioners you could schedule time with. Daily classes on all kinds of interesting topics, curated experts teaching advanced strategies in the areas of health, mindset, spirituality, personal development. Imagine the most friendly, welcoming, and supportive place to become your best, and it's all online. Nothing like this exists, and I am so excited to welcome you. Just go to thepbtinstitute.com/join to learn more. Thanks for listening. Can't wait to be with you next time, and here's to your breakthrough.